Tomorrow night at 7, Kenny Rogers and Linda Evans star in the dramatic conclusion of The Gambler 2. Chicago's very own 9 o'clock news.
Investigators search for clues that may help them identify two of the victims from last week's explosions and fires on Chicago's near west side. Good evening, I'm Rick Rosenthal.
And I'm Allison Payne. 3 people were killed in the disaster. People's Gas says its probe is to determine if an operating error caused the surge and resulting explosion. Joni Lum reports on the search for clues.
The debris from the explosion and fire was spread out across the lot at the Medill incinerator site. Firefighters used shovels, hose, and rakes to comb through the charred rubble until they finally found the jawbone of one of the victims, now identified as 19-year-old Steve Honig of Glencoe. The family says Honig was visiting a photographer who also died in the explosion. Meantime, the Illinois Commerce Commission is trying to determine why natural gas surges caused explosions and 10 fires that devastated the River West neighborhood. People's Gas initially said that a pressure regulator valve and its backup malfunctioned at the Carpenter and Chicago substation. The ICC sent a team of safety inspectors to the site.
The pressure control equipment is outside the damaged area, so it is intact. It can be looked at. That particular pressure station has been isolated. It is being studied in great detail.
Now a second set of regulating valves at Erie and Green Streets has been brought under scrutiny. A People's Gas spokesman says this substation was shut down for routine maintenance on Friday when the explosions occurred. Investigators are trying to determine whether that overloaded the regulator at Chicago and Carpenter.
Both vaults are supplying gas to that area. The overpressure could have occurred at either one of them, and the investigative team is going ahead with that.
The Citizens Utility Board is conducting its own investigation.
10 years ago, there was some evidence that People's Gas was lagging behind some of the other major cities in the northern part of the country which experience these cold climates in upgrading their gas distribution system. One of the things we're going to look at is whether that situation is continuing today and whether that contributed to this problem.
People's Gas has been updating Chicago's system to match the suburbs, where gas pressure is regulated at each individual home.
We are replacing our distribution system as a matter of routine maintenance. We are replacing our low-pressure system as a matter of routine maintenance as part of the program to replace our main system.
Mr. Doyle, how long have you been with
It's not being replaced because of safety.
The ICC hands its findings over to the National Transportation Safety Board, which means it could be a long time before it's determined what caused this disaster. Since their lives and homes were so quickly torn apart, residents here are demanding answers now. On the near west side, Joni Lum, WGN News.
And the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office today also identified the third victim in the explosion. She was 30-year-old Victoria Opeka of Chicago. Rick?
The family of victim Steve Honig has retained attorney Philip Corboy to represent them in what's expected to be a wrongful death suit to be filed against People's Gas. A People's Gas Company spokesman said the company did anticipate such suits would be filed. In addition to those who died, several others were injured. Many more lost their homes in the fires and explosions. Jim Ramsey is standing by live now at the site of a community meeting tonight where surviving victims are trying to find out just what will be the next steps for them. Jim?
Thank you, Rick. Actually, this meeting just adjourned. It lasted about 2 hours, but adjourned inside of the last 10 minutes. It was primarily an informational fact-finding type meeting. It was held, or at least orchestrated, by a local neighborhoods organization called the St. John's Neighbors of River West. As I say, it was an informational meeting of sorts. They were looking for answers to some of the nuts and bolts questions that were raised in the wake of last Friday's fires and explosions. Things like the amount of collateral damage, who would fix the streets, what types of community services might be available, things of that nature. In all, the meeting lasted, as we say, a little under 2 hours, and in as much as it started this evening around 7 o'clock. More than 200 people came here to St. John's Cantius Church to get some answers. Although most of these residents made their way through the crisis of Friday without either loss of property or injury, they have other worries. Organizers of this meeting hope to give them help.
We felt the need to get together and see who needs help and how we can help them and what we can do with regard to dealing with the gas company, dealing with people who need housing, and showing our concern for those who died and are homeless as a result.
For the past few days, gas trucks have been a common sight around here as crews check for problems and continue to make repairs. This has unnerved some people who wonder even now about the safety of their gas appliances.
Couldn't really sleep last night because we heard the People's Gas truck out all night, and just never really knew if it was safe to stay there.
Safety was all but assumed the day before the explosions. One person even recalled smelling gas in his home last Thursday. Such recollections have also been heard by People's Gas.
We had smelled gas the day before in the apartment. As a matter of fact, my roommate was the one who got up, and it was at 3 o'clock in the morning when he smelled the whole apartment filled with gas, and he raised up the windows and the doors and everything.
We had heard those rumors as well, or heard those comments. I won't call them a rumor. We are checking our records now. Typically, when we get a call on a leak, we're there within 30 minutes. That's about our average leak response time. To date, we started looking yesterday. We have not found any indications of any calls from any. I think there was a particular address involved that where that allegation was made, and so far from records immediately available, we have not found anything. We're continuing to look.
This meeting tonight was not without a few surprises. In fact, among the people who happened to show up here was John Cannon of People's Gas. He announced that a claims office was being set up at the corner of Division and Elston and would be in a position to issue checks for losses suffered in the fires and explosions. We also found out a few moments ago from our assignment desk at Channel 9 that at least a dozen people are still without gas in this area, but the gas company is hoping to have those people reconnected by tomorrow. Rick and Allison, back to you.
All right, Jim, thank you.
Rescue efforts are underway tonight in the eastern part of France, where a French Airbus A320 carrying 96 people crashed in snow and fog. Miraculously, officials report at least 11 people survived. The plane went down in the mountains about 30 miles southwest of Strasbourg. It was en route from Lyon to Strasbourg when radio contact was lost shortly before its scheduled landing. Few details about the passengers are available, although most reportedly were business travelers. Now, 2 A320s, which use computers capable of operating all flight controls, have crashed since the aircraft went into service. Airbus blamed pilot error in both accidents, but some aviation officials have suggested a computer malfunction on the plane.
In Denver, this holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has been marred by one of the things the civil rights leader most opposed: violence. Police had to use tear gas to break up a riot that broke out after the Denver City King Parade. A counter-rally by the Ku Klux Klan had also ended at about the same time, and there was a confrontation between the two groups. Police on horses were called in to break up the crowd after squad cars were overturned in the disturbance. One officer hit in the chest by a brick was among 5 people who were hurt.
Elsewhere in the country, events honoring the slain civil rights leader ended on a more peaceful note today. Here in Chicago, King was honored at the Zion Hill Missionary Baptist Church on the south side. Choirs from Kenwood Academy and the Pilgrim and Lilydale First Baptist churches remembered King's legacy with songs from the civil rights movement. And in Atlanta, thousands joined King's widow Coretta Scott King and South African activist Winnie Mandela in a march that ended at King's tomb. Mrs. King is challenging the Bush administration to keep her husband's dream alive by fighting poverty. The civil rights leader was assassinated on April 4th, 1968 in Memphis.
News analyst Joel Weisman is here now with a look at the King holiday and the current state of race relations. Joel?
You know, Martin Luther King's birthday means many things to many people, depending on your age often or your race. For some, it's just a day off. For others, a day of inspiration. For a handful, a day of bitterness. For me, it recalls reporting on Harold Washington leading legislative debates in Springfield just to make this day a state holiday, meeting and interviewing King and covering riots after his death. King's birthday gives all Americans a chance to reflect on the state of race relations, in fact, on treatment and inclusion of all minorities in our system. Once acknowledged the most racist city in the North, Chicago now boasts 35% of its city workforce black. Key department and agency heads are black, from the head of the schools, the junior colleges, the CHA and the Park District. There are more than 50 black judges, 22 aldermen. The state's attorney general, possibly its next governor. There's a viable black woman candidate for the United States Senate. 16 blacks are in the legislature, and the list goes on and on. Today's stories are no longer merely about the first black this or that, but about proportional representation and enough blacks at the highest levels. On the job, only 5% of whites in 1955 saw or related to blacks on their jobs. Today, 75% of employees say they relate to blacks in their jobs. 65% say they must deal with them to do their jobs effectively. In housing, though, integration statistics remain almost static since King was stoned marching right here through Gage Park in Cicero. The big question is whether increased statistics prove more opportunity and progress or merely more interaction between the races. But they cannot measure true racial feelings. We'll still see our highest office holders use Willie Horton-type ads and racial code words to appeal to our worst instincts for election advantage. We still hear racial jokes and epithets, and now more frequent complaints about reverse discrimination. The answers to progress in race relations are hard to measure because they transcend statistics. But it's a tribute to Dr. King that at least once a year we try to make the assessment. There clearly appears to be progress in numbers, but too often figures don't tell the whole story. The challenge, I guess, is to make some of the progress as real as it appears. I'm Joel Weisman.
And to say happy holiday to you.
And to you.
Thank you, Joel.
Okay.
A Miami resident accused of leading a squad that tried to sneak into Cuba on an apparent undercover mission was reportedly executed today in Havana. The Cuban news agency Prensa Latina said 38-year-old Eduardo Diaz Betancourt was put to death by firing squad. Betancourt and 2 other Miami men were captured in Cuba December 29th. The Castro government charged they were carrying guns and explosives and planned a sabotage campaign aimed at theaters and stores and other civilian targets. All 3 were originally sentenced to death. Sentences for the other 2 were later commuted to 30-year terms in prison. But tonight, the leader, Betancourt, was reported to have been executed.
And still to come on the 9 o'clock news, a CTA driver is killed by her own bus.
The suburban police department takes action in the wake of safety concerns over radar guns. And a special night for a little boy who finally gets to go home from the hospital 21 months after he was born.
On the Olympic downhill race course, there is no speed limit. So the U.S. Olympic team is covered by Blue Cross and Blue Shield, just like people here at home. Our HMO and PPO are the largest in Illinois, with more doctors and more locations. They outdistance all the others. Do you have Blue Cross?
Catch the spirit! Catch the spirit!
To help celebrate the 1992 Olympic Winter Games, the Illinois Lottery introduces Winning Spirit.
Catch the spirit!
Unlike the Winter Games, you don't need any practice to play this one.
Catch the spirit!
Anyone can play. Just scratch and see. You could win up to $250 cash.
Catch the spirit!
Winning Spirit. Got a second? Play this instant.
Service to more cities across the Atlantic than any other U.S. airline, Delta now makes it easier than ever for the people of America to get to know the people of Europe.
Buongiorno.
Bonjour.
Sia.
Guten Tag.
Grüezi. Delta. We love to fly and it shows.
Здравствуйте.
If you're thinking luxury in a sedan, this new Buick Skylark offers features not found on competing imports, like 6-way power driver's seat, compact disc player, and remote keyless entry.
If you're thinking performance in a coupe, this new Buick Skylark Grand Sport offers features not found on competing imports, like a bigger engine, computer command suspension, plus anti-lock brakes are standard.
The all-new 1992 Buick Skylarks. Think twice before you buy anything else.
See your better Buick dealer today.
There is renewed concern tonight over the health hazard that radar guns may pose to the police officers who use them in the field. In a WGN News investigation last year called Speed Trap or Death Trap, we told you about the nationwide concerns over whether the devices may in fact cause cancer. A Florida police department has already removed radar guns from its patrol cars, remounting them on car roofs. And now here in Illinois, the South Suburban Palos Hills Police Department is doing the same thing, born of the same concerns. It is the first department in this state to do that. A major radar gun supplier has long denied that they pose any health hazard.
Chicago Transit Authority officials are trying to determine how one of its parked buses could have run over a driver, killing her. 46-year-old Margie Johnson apparently parked the bus at the CTA barn on 103rd Street last night. Officials believe shortly after she stepped off, the bus began to move, hitting and then dragging Johnson some 40 feet before eventually running into a parked car. The CTA hopes to determine whether the bus was left in gear or switch gears. Johnson had been with the company for about 2 years.
Illinois lawmakers return to Springfield tomorrow. They are expected to vote on that plan to balance the state budget. The package is a compromise plan hammered out by Governor Edgar and Republican and Democratic legislative leaders. Lawmakers generally seem willing to accept the plan, but there are others who are not. Today here in Chicago, members of the Coalition for Fiscal Responsibility gathered to urge the state's lawmakers to vote no. The group is against a provision in the budget which would take away $11 each month from Illinois residents who receive transitional assistance checks. For one man attending today's rally outside the Wilson Club Hotel, the situation's worse. He's just been told he's been cut off from the program completely. And why?
I am no longer eligible. I am employable. I'm employable if there are jobs. Where are the jobs?
Well, that man and other members of the coalition used the Wilson Club Hotel as the scene for their rally today to make a point, saying the cut would reduce their monthly checks to $154. Monthly rent at the Wilson Club, they say, is $159.
A special night tonight for 21-month-old Jeremy Wilson of suburban Roselle. This is the first time in his young life that he's sleeping in a crib that's not in a hospital. Carol Davis-Dillett reports his family couldn't be happier.
Are you leaving? Huh?
This is little Jeremy Wilson. At 21 months old, a lung disease has kept him in hospitals for nearly all of his life. He's finally going home. His dad says it hasn't been easy, but his family helped him cope.
It's been a long haul, but with the family and everybody else holding together, everything's been going fine.
Joshua is Jeremy's 6-year-old brother. He says he's got some big fun lined up for baby brother.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you get home?
Put him on his rocking horse.
And though Jeremy's still tethered to this machine, his mom, dad, and big brother say they're confident he's ready to begin his full life at home.
He's very spunky, little dude.
Little Jeremy Wilson has spent most of his life in hospital beds like this one. Jeremy was born 2 months premature and suffers from a respiratory disease called bronchopulmonary dysplasia. He's living on a ventilator, and he must now learn to breathe on his own.
This is very much akin to clumping off one's nose and panting through a coffee stirrer at about 40 or 50 times a minute, which would become very tiring extremely quickly.
But caregivers have worked with the Wilson family to prepare them to care for Joshua at home.
Labrador's nurses have helped us, train us to help us learn all of Jeremy's things that we need to know with him, ventilator care. We've had to spend our 24 hours here each, me and my husband both by ourselves, and take care of him by ourselves.
And so Jeremy is off for some lifetime firsts. He wore his first snowsuit jacket. He didn't like it very much.
We gotta go bye-bye.
Took his first stroller ride. And took off with Mom, Dad, and big brother Joshua out into the wild blue yonder. But not before his primary nurse, Linda Daly, said her parting words.
Bye. You come visit. Not a whole lot.
And with that, little Jeremy Wilson's gear was gathered up to head home with his family. Carol Davis-Dillard, WGN News.
And he's so handsome, too. Doctors tell us Jeremy's future is quite bright. He is learning to walk and talk and is only on the ventilator for 16 hours now instead of all day and all night.
Still to come on the 9 o'clock news, the White Sox start their annual winter caravan.
And there's no rest for the Bulls. Another hot team comes in for the next challenge. Dan Roan is next with sports.
And the mild El Nino pattern is back in the Chicago area this week, but does that mean there won't be any rain or snow? We'll have details on that and look at temperatures for the week ahead when we come back.